Hello YouTube, my name is Tyler and this is my July wrap-up. So, I took the month of July off because I was in a reading slump, and a reading slump combined with vlogging weekly, editing weekly just was not a good combination. So there have been no vlogs, which means this wrap-up will be a little different than my last year of wrap-ups. I am not going to list all the books I read at the beginning as usual because there are no reviews for you to go watch elsewhere on my channel. So I believe my plan will be I will talk about my thoughts and feelings about certain books as they relate to certain stats related to my reading this month. And then at the end of the vlog, or after I get through my stats, I'll touch on the books that I didn't touch on elsewhere in this wrap up. And then I'll give you my little, what I'm still working on at the end of the month, and a little bit of a TBR for August, which is just like books that I need to read. Usually I also touch on the books that I bought through the month. However, July is my birthday month and I bought a lot of books this month. And it would just make this video way too long. So next week, sometime after this wrap up goes up, there will be a whole separate haul video. So if you're interested in the 10 books I bought this month, stick around to watch that video next week. So let's talk about the things I read. In the month of July, I read 17 books, which is wild. That is the most books I have read all year in a single month. That is so funny to me because I was in such a slump. I just was really overwhelmed by the things, by reading and like feeling like I had to force myself to read. I mean, there was a day this month I did not read at all. The first time all year I did not touch a book at all. And I still read the most books that I have read in the year, so that's wild. Of those 17 books, 9 came from the library. Officially, I read 7 books off my Goodreads TBR and 4 books off my physical TBR. However, I read all of these Yowamushi Petal volumes this month. I own this one already. I bought this one in June, I think, and I read it in July. And then I have bought 4, 5, 6, 7, and 8 this month. Those won't even be in the haul because I read 4, 5, and 6 this month. I have not been continuously putting them on my physical TBR because I am buying them as I read them, basically. And I read them pretty quickly. So I read 5 volumes of that this month, which would put it at 9 books off my physical TBR if I had been adding those. So yeah, that's a lot, a lot of books. I have also given every single one of these 5 stars. I am loving this series so much. It is about a boy, an otaku, who gets wrapped up in the world of road cycling, and he joins his school's, I guess like the Japanese equivalent of high school, his high school's road cycling team, and I just love it. He is like just so nerdy, but like the teamwork and the friendship and the like competitive but also like trying to help each other vibes of this is just so perfect. I love the series so much. I love it. I love it. I'm really happy with how my TBR reading went this month. Since I was not focused on vlogging, I really just made an effort of reading the things that I personally owned or were already on my TBR. So if I look at the more specific TBR stats, I went from 110 books on my Goodreads TBR to 107. I think that got down to as low as 104, but I did add some of my new physical acquisitions to the Goodreads shelf. However, I was not keeping up with it as well as I should have. It probably should be, I think it should be at 109, I think. I think there are 2 books that I haven't added. But they are on my physical TBR shelf, so I'm a little less worried about it because those books will get counted in my physical tabulations. So my physical TBR shelf went from 17 books to 20 books. So obviously I was reading off of it, but I was also buying a lot of books this month. All right, so the other sets I have, I read 6 or listened to 6 audiobooks. Let's take a gander at what those 6 were. So some audiobooks I read. The main ones I listened to She Who Became the Sun. Didn't quite love this, but I did give it 3 stars. Honestly, I remember so little of it right now. It started off as like a really good audio experience, but as the story kind of went on, I just got kind of bored, and like more narration or character perspectives started getting added, and it just got kind of confusing, and I don't know, didn't quite love it. Really enjoyed the first, I don't know, like quarter when she was with her family, and then she like goes to a monastery, and like her time at the monastery. Enjoyed all that stuff, but after it started getting more and more muddled for me. However, it was fine. I think I gave it 3 stars, and I will listen to the concluding book because it's a duology, and I think that's supposed to come out in the fall, I think. So I do plan on listening to that when it comes out, even though I didn't like love this first book. But I also listened to Sky Hunter and Steel Striker by Marie Lu. This was a duology fantasy, not really sci-fi, but maybe like vaguely sci-fi. I really liked it. It was on the YA side, so it wasn't like a 5-star experience, but I just had such a good time listening to it, especially the first one. I really, really, really liked the first one. I liked that the second one added in Red's perspectives, because Red and Talon got separated at the end of book 1, so it made sense for there to be 2 perspectives in the second book, and I do think it added a lot to the story. However, the second book focused or became more part of like a romance arc. I could tell it was coming in book 1, but it wasn't a very big or important part of the story, and it became more important in book 2, and like I just didn't love it because I'm just not like really into romance all that much, and since it was also YA, like I don't know, it just had those YA vibes that I just like don't connect to. But it was still a 4-star read. I still was really intrigued by the story, the battle going on with this federation that's like trying to take over the entire continent basically, and the like warriors that they were creating, because they were like ghosts, and they like gave people wings, and there was like this experimental element going on. I really, really liked Talon a lot. It gave me a little bit of Hunger Game vibes, in like a kind of outcast girl becoming a warrior for a nation that doesn't truly like accept her. So I don't know. I really enjoyed it though. I really liked the first book. The second book, not as much, but they were both 4 stars. Had a good time listening to them. And one other thing I listened to was Talking as Fast as I Can, from Gilmore Girls to Gilmore Girls by Lauren Graham. I gave this 3 stars. It was really, really short. There were some funny parts in it, but I don't know, some of her like commentary on like life in Hollywood and diet culture and stuff like that, I just like, I don't know, it just made me kind of uncomfortable. I didn't even necessarily totally disagree with her, but like just the way it was put, it was just kind of off-putting for me. And so, like, I didn't love it, but it's whatever. So let's see, what else do I need to talk about? Was that all my stats? I had one DNF. That was The Ruins by Adam Scott. I don't know. It's a horror book that's like a group of friends go to an abandoned like Mayan settlement or something. And I didn't even get to the creepy part because I just like I don't know, I didn't like the characters. I didn't like the way it was written. I picked it up. I wanted to read it for Summerween, and I ended up DNFing it like, I don't know, 50 pages in, maybe not even 50. I just like couldn't get into it. And so I ended up buying Tender as the Flesh somewhat recently, and I read that, but it definitely wasn't during Summerween. It took me a long time because I ended up wanting to finish some library books and things. So it wasn't until the end of the month that I read Tender as the Flesh. There was parts of it that I definitely felt like grossed out by in Tender as the Flesh, but it was just like really slow and just not as intense as I had hoped or imagined. And some of the like most of the disgust really kind of happened towards the beginning of the book as we're like getting introduced into this culture that is consuming people because the meat is like animal meat is tainted. So that disgust mostly came from like the beginning when we're explaining the society, but that tension and revulsion didn't really carry on through the whole book for me. I think I ended up giving it 3 stars. Yeah, I don't know why I said it like that. I had no 1 or 2 star reads this month. So yeah, that was my feelings on Tender as the Flesh. I did find it like really easy to read. It wasn't very like, it's like dense or opaque. So yeah. I believe that is all I needed to talk about on that page. Oh, I did read a Indigenous author this month, and that was, oh, I meant to look up how to pronounce his name. Indian Horse by Richard Wagamisi. This was 5 stars. I absolutely loved this book so much. It tells the story of a boy who, a native boy who is kind of living with his family, and they're trying to protect him from the residential schools in Canada. So they're doing some migrating, they're moving around, but they're kind of down on their luck. And that's like the first quarter of the book is him with his family talking about how like the residential schools have altered his family life basically by trying to avoid them. Eventually he ends up in the residential schools himself, and he ends up becoming obsessed with hockey, ice hockey. And it just like, it is his life. It's just like his life story. But the way that hockey is written about in this book was just beautiful. I mean, there are heavy, serious topics in here. It's not just like a happy-go-lucky like ice hockey book. It is, I don't want to say grim necessarily, but like kind of grim. I mean, it's tackling residential schools, it's tackling alcoholism, it's talking about the marginalization of Indigenous people in Canada. But there's just the way the hockey was written in here just truly just took my breath away. The whole book was incredible. I cried at the end. Like, yeah, it's so good. It is 5 stars. It was definitely one of my most favorite reads this month, if not my favorite. I really liked it. I wish I could remember the vlog that Kayla talked about this book in, because I know I got the recommendation from her and she also loved it. So I wish I could see what her thoughts were, but I could never find the vlog that she had actually talked about it in. So I'm really glad I picked it up and read it though. It was just so good and I cannot recommend it enough. And if you like hockey, I would suggest reading this book too, even if like literary novels are not your thing. I really do think there is a lot of value in this book, and if you enjoy hockey, I think you can get something out of this. I did also forget to mention it takes place in like the 60s, so it's not like a super like modern book. Although I think it was written in the 90s maybe, but it's so good. I loved it. As I said before, there were no 1 or 2 star rated books this month. There were 8 3-star books. Some of those were 2.5 stars that got rounded up, being Leech by Hiran Ennis. I did talk about it a little bit in my last wrap up because I was finishing it up as I was recording that. But I just didn't love it. I really liked Abigail Thorne's narration, but I just found the writing of it and the narration to be so confusing. I really struggled with like the world that this existed in, and I could kind of push past it in the beginning, but that information became more important as the book went on, and I became increasingly disconnected from the story. So while there were horror elements in it that I did like, it just became increasingly difficult for me to understand what the fuck was going on in that book. And I think the only other 2.5 star I read was The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy by Douglas Adams. This was also a Kayla book. She gave it 5 stars and I was like, oh, maybe I'll finally read it. It's just not my cup of tea. I just didn't like that like goofy style of sci-fi. In the beginning it was like kind of fun, and then it just kind of dragged and got boring. And for the vast majority of it, I was just like, could this be over? Even though it was such a short book. I thought I was going to give it a 2. I ended up giving it a full half star because near the end there was a whole like scene with space cops that I thought was actually quite funny, and was very anti-cop, and I enjoyed that. So yeah. So those 2 were probably my least favorite reads this month. Hi. I am in the middle of doing my first rough edit of this video and realized I completely and totally forgot to finish the ratings stats that I was in the middle of. So I gave 8 books 3 stars, 3 books 4 stars, and 6 books 5 stars. And that's like all Yowamushi Petal and Indian Horse. And then that gave me a rating average of 3.8 stars, which is the highest rating reading month of the year by quite a bit. That's wildly high, which makes sense because I read 5 whole Yowamushi Petal 5-star volumes of manga. And that will definitely crank up the average. So anyways, I just wanted to pop in and share that information. The only other stat I have is it took me 10 days to read a book this month, which makes a lot of sense. I finished 2 books that I had been working on for a very long time. So I finished reading Abolition Geography by Ruth Wilson Gilmore. That took me 30 days to read. This is a collection of essays about carceral geographies. And there was a lot of interesting information in this. I ended up giving it a 3 star, but boy howdy, it was dense, dry. I don't think I fully connected with the way Ruth Wilson Gilmore writes. It's very academic, but there was definitely good information in here. I'm glad I read it. But boy, I just was not ready for the type of book this was when I bought it, and when I started it. The other long read was Season of Migration to the North by Tayeb Saleh. This took me 29 days. This was actually a very short book. I gave this 3 stars. This is about a man from Sudan who goes to England, comes back to his hometown. There is a stranger in his hometown that he's like suspicious of, and he's like, what's your deal? And so it's like about his relationship to this stranger and like this stranger's story, because he also had gone to England and gotten into some trouble in England and then came back to Sudan. This was written in the 60s, and like it was fine. I do think near the end I just kind of got tired of it, and I took a very long break. It was not a long book. I think it was like 170 some pages. Like it was not long at all, but I took a couple weeks off between reading. So like I stopped, I don't know, like a quarter in. I stopped for a couple weeks and then kept reading, and I definitely lost my momentum, but I just wanted to be done with it. So I gave it 3 stars, but it was a struggle. It was a struggle. So yes, that is all my stats. So let me see what I haven't talked about yet. I talked about Leech and Yowamushi Pedal. I talked about all those books. I also listened to Debt, The First 5,000 Years by David Graeber. I gave this 4 stars. This was one of the authors of The Dawn of Everything, which I really loved when I listened to it. Was it this year or last year? Which really changed the way I understand society. There was definitely some interesting things in here, but this was, it dissected religious understandings of debt way more than I would have anticipated. I understood why it went that direction, why it did that, but it definitely was a little boring to me personally. But it just kind of was dissecting the concept and the idea of debt, and like monetary systems, and it was very listenable, but also a little dry. It wasn't as life-changing as The Dawn of Everything, but there was good information in here. I obviously enjoyed it because I gave it 4 stars. So yeah, that's what I have to say about that. And was there anything else? Oh, and the only other thing I haven't talked about is Midwives by Chris Bojalian. This is a story that takes place in like the 80s in Vermont. The main character is a teenager at the time, but she's like writing her recollection of what happened in the 80s as an adult. It is about her mother, who is a midwife, an unlicensed midwife, who has been helping women give birth at home for ages. And then a woman dies while she's giving birth, that her mother had been taking care of, and the state charges her with murder or attempted. They charge her with manslaughter, I think. And so it's like her adult recollections of what it was like being 14 while her mom is going through this very traumatizing legal experience. And as an adult, she becomes an OBGYN. So she has this knowledge also of like what her mom was doing, that she didn't quite have, you know, at 14, even though she had been attending births with her mom for a very long time. there were parts of it that were good. It was pretty like compulsively readable, not necessarily in the like I can't put this book down, but it was very easy to like pick it up and just read and read and read, and then you realize like, oh, I have read like multiple chapters. Like it was just a very readable book. I didn't quite love it. It was written by a man, and so for a long time it kept reading like a boy was writing about his mother. And so then when like something very girlish would happen, I would get jarred. Eventually it like stuck in my head that this is a teenage girl, but there was just some weirdness sometimes about the way he wrote things that I was just like, what? But overall it was fine. I gave it 3 stars. It was a perfectly fine book. It was very readable. It was, I guess, maybe kind of like I wouldn't call it a thriller, but like in that vein of like a courtroom drama, maybe is what it would be called. It was fine. It definitely was a recommendation I got from someone, but I don't remember who because I forgot to tag it on Goodreads. So those were the 17 books I read this month. I'm not sure if I'm going to vlog this month again because I did kind of like the more relaxed nature of my reading this month. However, my 30-minute wrap up I don't like as much. I need water. So as I finish this up, let's talk about the books that I am currently reading and will read in August. Those books are Last Night in Nook by Nivaka Corneliusen. This takes place in Greenland. It's very short. But I have been distracted by other things. I didn't read a lot. We were out of town on vacation. I read 1 volume of Yowamushi Pedal and that was it. I didn't do a lot of reading. So I had read half of it before vacation and I just haven't had a chance to get back to it. The other thing I'm currently reading is The Feminist and the Sex Offender, Confronting Harm, Ending State Violence by Judith Levine and Eric R. Miners. I got this recommendation from Olivia Gatwood on a podcast she was on. I have a lot of mixed feelings about this. I'm about halfway through. I'll finish it soon. There's good stuff in here and then there is stuff that has me like, what? So I'll be intrigued to see if and how they pull it all together. But it does feel more like a series of essays and not necessarily like one conclusive work. Like where every chapter is like building on something. So I don't know if I'm going to be satisfied by the end, but we'll see. So the other things I'm going to talk about are just 2 library books that I have, so I need to read them. I actually checked out both of these before I went on vacation, thinking I would read more on vacation than I did. But Little Eyes by Samantha Schweblin. Pretty sure Kayla read this. It's by the same author who wrote Fever Dreams, which like I didn't love, but I did enjoy enough. I was intrigued enough by the writing to want to pick up another book by her. And then the other one is Lay Your Body Down. I got this as a recommendation in a subreddit I am in. It's kind of like a cult religious type book. A young woman returns to her rural Minnesota hometown where a radical evangelical pastor has poisoned everyone's minds and may be covering up a murder. After she fled her small hometown and its cult-like church, she vowed never to return. Blah, 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 yeah. Anyways, you get it from that. So those are 2 books I got from the library, should be reading or DNFing in the month of August. And then, yeah, I have a whole fat stack of books that I have bought and we'll do a haul video for... I wanted to do it today, but I have been talking for so long. My mouth is so dry. I'm so tongue-tied. I don't think I'm going to record it today. I think I'll have to record it later this week. But yeah, I'll probably read a couple of those in August as well. So I will see you next week with the haul. And otherwise, thanks for watching. Bye.